We have a problem. I don't want this video to come off immediately as some kind of scare tactic, rage bait. Let's talk about all the problems just because that's going to get clicks or views. I really want this to be a canary in the coal mine type video. We are collectively burning down the house of our social, relational, and dating market. While we're all inside the house, and a significant portion of the population seems invested in not only denying that there are any flames at all, but portraying the flames as something good. What I have seen happen to social media over the last couple of years is that it has progressively become a pre-game lobby for pornography. And this seems to be only accelerating. At first, it was this explosion of hypersexualized content. You know, Charli D'Amelio, one of the largest content creators on TikTok and the first one to become massively famous on that platform, at least in the United States or this market, did so by dancing, in a quite sexual way. And that was her contribution of value to collective humanity. And then as content like that seemed to drop away a little bit as these platforms increased some of their content standards in order to promote a wider variety of content other than 15 to 18-year-old girls sexualizing themselves in front of the general population, we started to see a little bit less of that. However, there was an explosion in OnlyFans and Fansly content, and there's a new trend that I'm starting to see, which is very disturbing to me, and I'm sure some of you may have seen this as well, which is if you go across YouTube or you go across Instagram, a lot of the top comments or the pinned comments on Instagrams are now from OnlyFans models who are paying creators to pin their comments at the top of viral posts in order to garner more views. It seems to me that what is happening is not only a transformation of every social media platform, partially or in large part into a pre-game lobby for pornography, but what we are seeing is a transformation of every social media platform into an advertising space and a mechanism for the exploitation of men. For example, just yesterday, I was watching a video clip from a podcast by a very large podcaster who I don't want to share because I don't want people to get any ideas and go searching for this particular page. However, the top comment underneath this clip from a podcast was from, you guessed it, an OnlyFans creator who had a YouTube channel with about 12 videos and over 1 million subscribers in which she was posting videos of herself in see-through lingerie. And this is on YouTube. This is legitimate pornography masquerading as acceptable content by community policy and community standards being actively advertised on platforms and spaces and channels in the YouTube community that are frequented by primarily young men, so guys between the ages of roughly 15 to 35. Now, is one comment on one YouTube video or a couple pinned posts at the top of some Instagram pages enough to be sounding the fire alarm? No. However, I want to zoom back for a minute and remind ourselves of the scope of what has transpired technologically over the last 20 years, and in particular, how it is affecting men, how it is affecting women, and how it is absolutely demolishing the dating market, the social commons that we all depend on in order to find healthy, meaningful, long-lasting relationships that result in meeting our needs and the creation of families. Now, I want to quick interject. If you have a problem with anything that I just said about the social commons having a purpose of generating families, I would like to remind you that no civilization can continue to exist if reproduction stops happening. Throughout all of human history, up until about 1970, there was no such thing as pornography. There was erotic art, but there was no formalization of human beings having intercourse with each other put into a package which could be mass distributed to other people. That first began in about 1970 with the creation of some of the first pornographic films. What followed along with that are the creation of some magazines like Playboy and Hustler. But up until about 2004, those were the only modalities through which pornography could proliferate through society. And in large part, the vast majority of people, unless you were an adult, or unless you stumbled across your dad's or some random guy's Playboy or Hustler magazine, you largely were insulated from pornography. That changed in 2004 with the arrival of high-speed internet pornography, and then again revolutionized in 2008 with the arrival of the iPhone. There's some very interesting statistics where you can see that in 1999, the rates of erectile dysfunction among men under the age of 35 were 0%, rounded to the closest integer. By 2011, 3 years after the introduction of the iPhone, those numbers were as high as 28%. So with the arrival of a novel sexual technology, we also saw an explosion in a debilitating sexual health issue in a demographic of men for whom that issue was never a thing. We then began to see a steady proliferation of internet-capable devices into the hands of younger and younger people. With the creation of the iPhone and then the iPod Touch and subsequent touchscreen technologies, we started to see that people were able to access pornography from the privacy of their own devices at younger and younger ages as parents gave those devices to younger and younger kids. This was the birth of a generation of young people, primarily young men, for whom their first several hundred or thousand sexual experiences would be alone with a device with pornography. Starting with this generation and moving forward, most young men will have seen several gangbangs before they've ever actually held hands with a real girl. And this is the foot that we want you to start off on in life. In 2014, we see another revolution of this technology when AI was introduced to the sorting algorithms of various tube sites and social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and these pornography companies who implemented this in order to maximize their ad revenue. The more videos you watch, the more money they make, and so they have a vested financial interest in warping and twisting your sexual preferences and sending you more and more extreme content over time that will trigger psychological mechanisms in your brain to keep you on their website watching as much pornography and generating as many ad impressions as possible so they can generate as much ad revenue as possible. In combination with this, we start to see data emerging that is indicating that the largest user demographics of pornography are in fact the exact age demographic for whom this technology is supposed to be illegal, that is, children under the age of 18. Now I'm going to keep moving forward here. In 2016, we saw the birth of subscription-based pornography websites like OnlyFans. We also started to see the arrival of dating apps and the mass proliferation and popularization of social media to the point where it has more or less become a kind of social infrastructure. If you are not actively participating in social media, you are sort of stuck in a version of society where you do not have access to the same information or resources that other people have should they choose to use these platforms. Now, I want to begin to tie this together, bring in a couple statistics, talk about the net outcome of these technologies on men and women and society as a whole, how it affects you, and ultimately why I started this video by saying I believe the house is literally burning to the ground. Now, the first claim that I want to make to you before I jump into the data is that what we see is that every single one of these sexual technologies, from pornography to OnlyFans to dating apps, are overwhelmingly exploitative of men. As social media became more and more common and people became more and more isolated, dating apps started to become more and more appealing as options to find potential romantic partners. However, when we look into the data, we see that the vast majority of users who are on dating apps are men. Not only is there a massive gender imbalance on these apps that disproportionately puts men at a disadvantage, they also seem to be utilizing a set of psychological triggers and algorithmic choices which cause women to be hyper selective of the men that they will swipe right on. Certain studies have found that as little as 5 to 7% of women will swipe right on any given profile, where you see something like 54 to 60% of men swiping right on any given profile. It's important to remember that these dating apps are incentivized to make money. The way that they will make more money is by making men more desperate and making women feel more powerful. This is an introduction to the kind of exploitation that I'm talking about, which seems to be disproportionately affecting men. 80 to 90% of these right swipes from women were also only and exclusively on the top roughly 10% of male profiles. Some more disturbing statistics on what the use experience is like for your average man is that it takes the average guy on a dating app 200 swipes to get one match. And then it gets worse. 4 out of 5 arranged dates will end up ghosting or flaking. What dating apps appear to have done is create a digital artificial status environment which our brains cannot distinguish from the real dating market. When you swipe and swipe and swipe and swipe and you get absolutely zero matches, your brain starts to internalize that as a deflation in your perceived status. You start to believe that your value and attractiveness is significantly lower than it probably is in the real world. This means that unless you put in a concerted effort to make your dating app profile probably the top 5%, a dating app is largely just a tool for increasing your feelings of inadequacy, lowering your status, harming your mental health, and making it harder for you to get into an actual relationship with a real girl. Not even to mention the fact that if you spend 10 hours a week swiping on a dating app and getting zero results, that is a massive opportunity cost where you could have spent that 10 hours actually socializing and meeting real women you could have real relationships with. For the majority of men, this is a poisonous technology. Dating apps are largely just a tool for artificially lowering your status, your sense of worth, your sense of attraction, and then exploiting that desperation and pain for money. The far more insidious technology than dating apps, but something which goes hand in hand with them, is obviously pornography. Now, I have another video that I'll link up above, which goes into a more comprehensive overview of a lot of the statistics surrounding pornography. But I want to hyper-focus on a recent release of data that is showing the massive increase in the use of pornography and subscription-based sites like OnlyFans. To start, in 2019, there was a study that was done which found that roughly 11% of men and 3% of women admitted to having a pornography addiction. In October of this year, 2024, another study came out which interviewed over 8,800 college-aged people, both men and women, and found that 63% self-identified as having a pornography addiction. That is a massive explosion in the use of pornography. Now, going hand in hand with that, in 2020, OnlyFans had 85 million users and 1 million creators, generating over $2 billion that year in revenue. As of December 2024, OnlyFans has 400 million. Let me say that again. 400 million active users and 3 million active content creators. And as of this year, has paid out over $20 billion to creators. It should be no surprise to any of us what the demographics are on those statistics. The overwhelming majority of subscribers are men, and the overwhelming majority of creators are women. Now, similar to dating apps, but in a much more extreme fashion, the revenue model of pornography companies, whether it's something like Pornhub or OnlyFans, means that they have a vested financial interest in harming their user base in order to make them into more profitable consumers. The more lonely and dysfunctional you are relationally, the more likely you are to pay them money or spend more time on their websites. They are actively profiting off of the loneliness and sexual dysfunction of men. People today are lonelier than ever. More and more men are involuntarily single and celibate. For the first time ever, over half of women over the age of 33 do not have a child. The average age of first marriage for men is now over 30. And as a quick historical fun fact, in every single society and civilization where the age of first marriage for men got above 28, there was a civil war. The rates of involuntary celibacy and singleness among young men tripled from 2008 to 2018. Roughly 63% of men under the age of 30 now report being single. Interestingly enough, this number is significantly higher than what is reported among the same age group for women, revealing something that a lot of us know to be true, which is that social media and dating apps seem to have funneled the vast majority of female attention onto a hyper small percentage of very successful men. So let's recap for a moment what it's like to grow up in this society as a young man. Statistically speaking, your first exposure to hardcore internet pornography will be at age 11. By your early or mid-teen years, you're probably on social media. So now by age 16 to 18, the majority of your formative sexual and relational years have been shaped primarily by pornography, and you are now in an environment where every single platform that you interact with is inundated with predatory advertising that has, like I said, essentially turned every single one of these platforms into a hypersexualized pregame lobby in order to get you to go spend more time or money on pornography. And we're looking around our society today and wondering why men are the way that they are. And at the same time, you are walking up against a lot of cultural narratives which are painting you as the problem. God forbid you speak up about this seemingly infinite mountain of pornography and hypersexualized content that is being shoved down your throat and marketed to you in a predatory way, because your lust and your sexual desire is the problem. Don't you see? There would be no supply if there wasn't a demand. You're the problem. And this is where this conversation absolutely makes my blood boil. We are selling our boys to addictive and exploitative sexual industries, and then we are blaming them for the consequences. This is absolute insanity. What we are seeing is the mass exploitation and commoditization of the vulnerabilities and legitimate human needs for intimacy, emotional, and sexual connection among young men. If you're a 25-year-old guy who's deeply struggling with your relationships and you were first exposed to pornography at age 10, you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, man. You should have learned to say no. Because you see, women are allowed to sexualize themselves as much as they want, to market themselves in a predatory and aggressive way to young men. But the instant you sexualize them, you're the problem. We don't live in a world where men are seen as being vulnerable or having problems. We live in a world where men are seen as the problem. Now, I want to pause for a moment and say this as clearly as I can, because this is the reality that I see that I do not hear almost anybody really talking about. The most powerful technologies which exist on this planet related to sex and relationships are largely functioning to capture young men and exploit their developing minds in order to turn them into lifelong consumers, then progressively deflate their status and perceived value, make them lonely and relationally dysfunctional, and then commoditize their basic human need for intimacy and connection in order to turn it into a steady revenue stream. This is psychopathic, this is sociopathic, this is Machiavellian, this is evil. And men also aren't the only ones who are being negatively affected by this. The creators of all kinds of pornography, whether it's on Pornhub or OnlyFans, are essentially like sexual oil barons. They are polluting, damaging, and killing the environment that we all depend on in order to fulfill our basic needs in the name of profiting themselves. They are participating in a system which is systematically stripping men of validation and the capacity for meaningful interaction, and then drawing them into a cycle of giving them money in order to find the closest possible proxy for intimacy and real relationships in their life. And all the while, a lot of these men do not realize that they are not actually talking to the content creators that they are paying. They are actually talking to a small office of men who are being paid to message all of this content creator's followers. These businesses are putting down an incredibly powerful financial incentive to encourage women to abuse their sexual powers for exploitative gain and to not care at all about the consequences. Tell me what OnlyFans model would actually date a guy that's paying for her content? None. She is actively harming the social commons upon which she depends in order to get her relationship needs met, just so she can make money. What we have created is a technological system which is fragmenting our social environment, creating men who are relationally and sexually incompetent, and encouraging women to start abusing their sexual power for exploitative and selfish and Machiavellian purposes. I truly believe that we are living in a time where the average man's rite of passage is now going to be quitting and staying free from pornography. And I truly believe that we are going to see a steady decline and possible death of our society if we continue to allow such a massive percentage of our society to be captured by these hyper-pornographic technologies. I want you to know that if you are struggling with pornography and all of the things related to struggling with it, like loneliness, having trouble getting dates, all of it, that it wasn't your fault. You did not create the internet, you did not create the iPhone, you didn't create your laptops, you did not create the brain that you have that made you vulnerable to these highly exploitative technologies. Something absolutely has to change socially. But between now and that change really beginning to happen, you have to understand that while it is not your fault, your recovery is your responsibility and your responsibility alone. If you are somebody who is struggling with pornography and you want to learn how to break free, I am here for you. I understand what it's like. I'm on your side and I have resources to help you. I have a mentorship program where I get people free from pornography for good. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please go to the link down below in the description and book a call with me. I would love to help you break free from the system of abuse and exploitation that is harming you, your life, and your relationships for ad revenue. I hope you got some value from this video. Peace.